What's up, everybody? Welcome into an 18th straight loss edition of SSPN.
Oh, Jude, you're funny.
Oh my gosh, dude. Well, I think the facial expressions of us right there, kind of
hmm
the intro. I don't even know how to start out with this game because the fourth quarter was really solid in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think the big asterisk to the fourth quarter is the fact that LA kind of thought they had the game won, like we did watching the game going into the
Mhm.
fourth quarter. So I think a little bit of that, ease of the pressure and intensity from LA definitely helped us get back in the game. I don't want to dismiss that. But
Yeah.
at the same time, eerily similar, even though this wasn't a win, eerily similar to that first game against Phoenix, Keldon Johnson, who was our leading scorer tonight, just was willing us into staying within like 10 points when it came to the deficit. And he was, if he didn't score during that stretch, we wouldn't have had a chance to even make the run that we did kind of in the last 4 minutes of the game, Ethan. I know we usually do game flow here and kind of run through all the quarters, but just with the dichotomy of the first three
Mhm.
quarters and really even the first I guess 8 minutes of the
Mhm.
fourth quarter, it was just so completely different than what we saw in those last 4 minutes. I think we can maybe kind of talk about those last 4 minutes and then
Mhm.
go through the rest of the game afterwards, just because they were so different.
Yeah, the last 4 minutes, suddenly the Spurs decided to play with intensity, Jude. And it kind of felt like suddenly Pop must have said in the huddle, why is Keldon the only one out here actually trying? And so suddenly everyone really turned up the intensity defensively. So we were getting a lot of easy baskets in transition. Guys started to see the shots falling. Victor Wembanyama obviously led kind of that push as well. And we were able to sneak back into the game and almost win it. Had it not been for that ill-advised pass that Anthony Davis stole
Yeah.
at the end of the game, this might have been a game that went into overtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really, we would have had a 1 point advantage if
Yeah,
we didn't give that steal up.
because he hit a three.
And yeah, and then if obviously it wasn't close, but if that Wemby I say and one, he got free throws on it. If that would have dropped, that would have been if he would have made the and one free throw.
hmm
That would have been the lead there. But yeah, if I had to look back on one play that was like the most dire in those last 4 minutes that sealed the Spurs' fate, it was that turnover. And it was just and was it, I mean, that turnover, Ethan, is like the it's a play that represents this Spurs season so well, because how many times has that happened this year
Yeah.
in close games for us?
It comes back to that theme that we've harped on over and over again, Jude. No matter how well we might play for stretches, those youth filled mistakes will always come back to bite us in the butt, and that's exactly what happened in that fourth quarter.
Absolutely. I was trying to get the box score up there, Ethan, while you were talking. So we're going to get that up here in just a second. And then we'll get to some of y'all's comments. I saw some people already in there. They were talking about how the defense was just horrible through the first three quarters, which I
hmm
completely agree. That was one of the things I had written down. It was just what's the word? It was just defensive rotations were just a mess
Yes.
for the majority of the game before that intensity, like you mentioned. But here we go, getting the box score up. We'll also get a little ticker going here. Um, Obviously, 28 from Keldon, 4 for 4 from three, efficient, 10 for 14 overall. He had 8 assists as well. And I know there's a lot of negatives in this game, but I'm going to talk about Keldon, and then I'm going to talk about Wemby, and then we're going to go to game flow and discuss all of those because there were so many.
hmm
But the 8 assists, I noticed that a couple times from Keldon tonight, that he was almost kind of like the main playmaker. And because of the attention that he draws, going to the rim, and I'm not saying he's necessarily like drawing two, but Keldon Johnson is somebody on other teams' scouting reports where they're like, hey, like pay attention to him going to
Yeah.
the rack. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that, when he was coming off those screens, most of those assists were in pick and roll situations. So that's something, we've harped on that a little bit before. We've kind of seen that in flashes, but I think this was his highest assist game of the season, maybe even of his career. And that was just something that I noticed also on top of his scoring, that maybe in that starting lineup. Obviously, Malachi is still going to play make to an extent, but as you see, Malachi tonight had 0 assists.
Hmm.
So that's just something to kind of keep an eye on moving forward whenever it comes to playmaking in that starting lineup. Maybe we'll see that more from Keldon because I really saw some good passes from him tonight. And then, of course, Victor. Obviously, he had his struggles to start the game. Definitely, if I'm just being completely honest, got schooled by Anthony Davis a couple times. It's just going to happen, for his, just considering it's his first time playing against Anthony Davis.
Hmm.
But was able to respond throughout the game. Still was able to have 13 boards since he's been in that center position. He's had 20 boards, 18 boards, and 13 boards. So that's really been good to see, especially when you consider Zach's struggles when he was in the starting lineup
Yep.
on the boards. And then, of course, being the leading scorer with 30 points and 6 blocks as well. You see the shooting percentage at 50%. That was kind of the dichotomy of the first half versus the second half for him. But he made a lot of plays in the clutch, and he responded to AD a few times. What were kind of your thoughts on Victor and Keldon?
Keldon Johnson, I think, might benefit more than anybody from the new lineup change. And part of the reason that being, Jude, is when we had Zach and Wemby on the floor, spacing was limited for drives. And what does Keldon Johnson do best? Drive.
Yep.
So oftentimes he kind of got into a bad habit of only shooting threes. And Keldon can hit threes. Like tonight, he was 4 for 4, but there are other nights where he'll go over 10. And
Like
it's like,
last game.
yeah, please stop shooting threes. Well, that's just not his strength. Like he has that in his game. He can take them when he's wide open. But his greatest strength is taking guys off the dribble and attacking the rim. Now he has the space to do that, where before we were really only getting inside points off of post ups or backdoor cuts out of the high post with Zach operating as that hub. We really didn't have anybody driving to the basket. So now we open up that part of his game, and that will only open up his playmaking ability as well because, like you said, he's a freight train. He's a big body. You have to double Keldon
Mm-hmm.
Johnson when he drives to the hole, which opens up weak side corner threes and just kick out scenarios where we can actually move the ball like we used to when we were at our best. Victor Wembanyama, you're right, struggled early, kind of found a groove, finished with 30 points. I actually was kind of surprised when I
Me
heard
too.
that because it didn't feel like he was scoring all that much, but he definitely had a flurry of points in the second half, which I guess added up quite a bit considering he had 30 and 13 and 6 blocks tonight. As far as his struggles against Anthony Davis, literally every big in the NBA will struggle against Anthony Davis defensively. He's a Hall of Fame player. I know he's injury prone. I know some people have opinions of him that are negative, but he's still Anthony, the Brow Davis. So I really thought he held his own for the most part. There's just some things you can't defend. And obviously, Victor is not as physical as AD yet. But I still enjoyed how he took it right back at him, Jude, like you were saying. He didn't back down from the challenge. And when he's hitting 4 out of 5 threes, he becomes extremely difficult to guard. I think when he's missing his 3 pointers, it almost feels like that's his something he can fall back on. So when those aren't falling, it limits him entirely offensively. Part of that might be because we're not running offense, but as far as right now, where he is currently in his career, he needs to be hitting those threes to really show an impact in the scoring column.
It's kind of similar. It's different because Victor has so many different ways to score offensively other than threes, but it's
Hmm.
kind of similar to Zach in the sense, how we've had that
Yeah.
conversation about Zach, where it's like when he's hitting threes, it feels like suddenly, his rotations become a little bit better. Just his flow of the game, and his rhythm within the game is a lot better. And I think that's kind of similar to what you were saying about Wemby as well.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
And then, while we're looking at this box score, Ethan, I didn't even realize Malachi had 19 points. It makes sense
Yes.
looking back on it. He was efficient. And like I said, even though he didn't have the assist tonight, that was more of Keldon's job. And look at, I know Jeremy, you're going to see 2 for 9, 1 for 4. It doesn't feel like he did that much offensively, at least when you watch the game. I know he hit 1 3, as we can see up there. And I remember that in the first quarter. But he also had 5 assists tonight. So you see a little bit of his playmaking skills still,
Hmm.
translating over after transitioning from the point guard role back to power forward. And you also still see him guarding point guards, and you still see a lot of those, getting caught under screens from time to time. But at the same time, D'Angelo Russell, let me scroll up and see what his box score was tonight. Held to 6 for 13, 0 for 4. Yes, he did have 10 assists, but in a game like this, and obviously it didn't turn into a win. So that's still a key. But in a
Mhm.
game like this where LeBron is out, being able to hold, kind of take D'Angelo Russell out of the game for the most part offensively, at least scoring wise. Like I said, still was playmaking for the team tonight, obviously. But scoring wise is an example of why we're still playing Jeremy on the point guards in that lineup. Because to be honest, let's just be honest, as much as I was just complimenting Malachi, uh, he might have got a couple more shots up if Malachi was guarding D'Angelo Russell. But the bigger point here, Ethan, that I was getting to was 19 points from Malachi. I really like how he fits in with this lineup. I feel like we've already spent too much time on the positive just with how this game went, but I'm going to
Mhm.
finish up this point on Malachi because I think it is something that's important moving forward. Um, and that's just that he's not forcing as much, Ethan. Like, he had 20 points tonight. I say 20, I know it's 19, but y'all get what I'm saying. He had that type of scoring night, but it wasn't like he was out there like in isolation looking for his shot. Like, he was
Mhm.
playing off of other guys and finding it that way, which I think is exactly the role that he needs in the starting lineup.
Yeah, he's definitely become a different player since being inserted to the starting lineup, which I think is kind of surprising. Only because his best quality is being a three-level scorer that can play in isolation. So I assumed he would play really well coming off the bench as that primary ball handler and scorer. That hasn't been the case thus far. We insert him in a starting lineup, and you're right. He just kind of fits in next to these guys and makes the right basketball play. And this also, in conjunction with that, has been more aggressive, I feel like, or at least looks more comfortable getting to his spots. And he's finishing with a higher volume of shots as well as a higher efficiency inside at the rim, which is something we really didn't see from him when he was coming in off the bench. So I don't know what the shift was for him. Maybe it's just playing around better players has opened things up for him. Maybe he talked to Pop and he's actively looking to get easier shots for himself, but he's definitely improved these past couple games
Yeah. I feel like he's been more decisive as well. Like,
for
there's
sure.
this one layup late in the game, I believe, where he just, we could have set up an offensive set but he just saw there was an open driving lane.
Yeah.
So he took the guy who's in front of him off the dribble and went and got the left hand lay. Or actually it was a right hand lay. Let me stop. But
On the left side.
yeah, it was contested. So
Yeah.
it was a tough shot by him. And it was a decision for a 20-year-old that, those are
Hmm.
the little progressions we can see, Ethan. But let's get into the rest of the game flow. I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat. We're going to get to the game flow here in a second, but shout out to JDM, 3 Elite Culture, Vane Stain, Mr. Z, Connor McLeod, Adrian, 2 Clutch Corey, July 26, Proto Zero X, and Hanover, a lot of the real ones in here. King J, I haven't seen you in a while, so shout out to all you guys being in here tonight. Now, Ethan, let's get to the bad stuff.
Mm.
Spurs open the first quarter 34-26. The notes that I had written down, no answer for AD, at least in the first quarter, right? We talked about how Wemby responded later, but
Hmm.
early was definitely struggling. The majority of our shots in that quarter, Ethan, were either threes or free throws. Excuse me, the majority of our points were either threes or free throws. Um, and then the other thing, the Lakers shot 63%. We shot 39%. And then the other thing I had written down is we have no answers in certain isolation matchups. Because when you're playing a team like this, that's trying to compete for a championship, and we'll see how that goes this season. But that's their goal, right? That's how
Hmm.
this team is built. Um, those are the type of teams that the Spurs are going to have struggles with in isolation matchups. I mean, think about the other team in Los Angeles we've played a couple times this year in the Clippers.
Yeah. Yeah, these kind of teams are going to be a struggle. And what was going through my mind when the game first started, Jude, is it was kind of even at first, and then they jumped out to a small lead to end that first quarter, 34-26. But um, watching the Lakers play, they're a veteran team. Even without LeBron, they have Anthony Davis, D'Lo, Torian Prince. Like, these are solid players. Anthony Davis, obviously being a Hall of Famer, the centerpiece. Um, but we are getting Spursed. How we used to play against teams. Remember how consistently we would play. I don't care what the other team is doing. We have a certain cadence, a certain rhythm, and a certain level of execution where we will painstakingly play you to death. It's like little pinpoints, bing, 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 but we would never really kill ourselves. That's what the Lakers did for the first 3 quarters against us, where we would have small little bursts. I think the first quarter is a perfect example of that. We had small little bursts, moments of like, oh great, this is fantastic energy, followed by levels of complete idiocy defensively and and lapses in judgment offensively and bad passes and lackadaisical play, whereas the Lakers stayed consistent and level-headed the entire time. And that's how they consistently ended up beating us in each quarter, all the way up to the fourth quarter where they may have taken their foot up off the gas.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far off the game flow, Ethan, but I think what you were talking about there kind of ties into some of the team stats. I haven't looked at them yet, but I wanted to check them out with what you were talking about. I wanted to see how many turnovers we had. It was actually kind of a close
Pretty even.
turnover battle, but then again, look at the points off turnovers. They had 24 to our 17. They had more fast break points than us. They had more points in the paint, and their largest lead was 20. That was the other thing that, like, if you look at this game and you just look at the final score, you're like, oh, the Spurs actually battled with the Lakers tonight. Nope.
Mm,
I mean, we did in the fourth
yeah.
quarter, but not for the entire game. We did actually out rebound them on the offensive boards, but it kind of evened out with them out rebounding us by the same advantage on the defensive boards. They had more assists than us. They had 6 more steals than us. You can see that, well, we actually shot a little bit better than them from the three, um, and got to the line more. But I feel like a lot of these, now that I'm looking at these stats, Ethan, I think they're a little bit distorted because of the fourth quarter. I would like to see these before the fourth quarter, and I think that would maybe
Mm,
help you. That would go to your points a little bit. That's why I was kind of thinking of that as soon as you were talking about it. But
yeah.
moving on to the second quarter, was a little bit closer, but it was still, I mean, really the main story, the same story, excuse me. The Lakers 29-24. What I had written down, Ethan, was rotations were rough in general. Really rough early in the second quarter.
Hmm.
Um, the Lakers stayed with around a 10-point advantage for most of it. There was one point where we ended up getting close, and as soon as that happened, kind of like you were just harping on, uh, and it wasn't even really close. It was just semi-close. They went on a run to extend their lead again. Um, I wrote it down again. Defensive rotations are bad, and AD is teaching Wemby rookie lessons. And then the last thing I wrote down is we did have a strong finish to the second quarter, where Wemby kind of responded for the first time, hitting some shots that made it an 11-point game, I believe, going into halftime.
Yeah, it's really more of the same. I think it all stems back to defense, like you said. If we could just figure out defensive rotations, we might be able to win a few games. Like, not we still won't be great because offensively we aren't implementing any kind of scheme, and we have a lot of chemistry to build. But if we could just get a stop, Jude, and not even a stop, if we could just get stop giving them wide open threes, we might have a chance.
Okay, so the when I wrote this down, Ethan, this was after in the second quarter where they got like literally like 3 wide open threes.
Yeah.
And if we had more effort, like I get some of it, it's like when they get an offensive rebound, sometimes there's going to be somebody out there that you just can't get to in time. Like I
Mm,
get that in certain situations, but it was like 3 straight wide open threes, and it was just because nobody knew where to go, even on the offensive rebound. And they're also really, and maybe, they weren't really giving effort because they weren't sure exactly where to go, and that what was, they didn't want to make that mistake,
mhm.
and then get chewed out. But I mean, they're probably going to get chewed out regardless at
Yeah.
halftime. But the thing that I was noticing is not only were they not sure where to rotate, they weren't even really giving effort to try to go close out in that situation, and that's the stuff that's really frustrating. With that being said, still overall, the finish to the second quarter, even though that may have coincided a little bit, was better than the rest of the first half. I'll give him that.
Yeah, and in the first half, I think it might have been second quarter, to your point, Keldon, I think, had like a backcourt steal and finish or something like that. And I wish I had written down his exact words because I read his lips. But to summarize, in Ethan's words, not his, he basically said, "Come on, let's get our heads out of our asses and play some and like play some defense. And I was like, yes, Keldon. Thank you, Keldon Johnson, for actually, because he literally all 4 quarters he played a great game. So he was desperately trying to pull the rest of the guys with him.
This is why going into this season, Ethan, I know we've had some other weird comments on here of people saying we were hating on Keldon, but I think most of you guys know who've been watching this channel that we've been very big advocates of Keldon.
For
And
sure.
before this season, I kind of went on a little rant just with all the stuff that's been going on around the internet, the trade rumors this summer, talking about him defensively and just how he's, we're overpaying him and how he's not worth it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was a lot of that this summer. This is the type of this, even though we didn't win tonight, this was basically like all last season.
Yeah.
And
Dude.
and to do that in these circumstances, like we talk about mental toughness, and I know Keldon has bad games. He still does from time to time. He's had bad games this year.
Mm-hmm.
But he is someone that in these scenarios, we've seen it in the Phoenix game and we saw it tonight. And like I said, the majority of last season, he is a dude who will continue to fight regardless of the circumstances. I thought we had no shot when we were down 20. I thought it was wraps, chicken wraps, over with. And he just kept making shots, keeping us in the game. Like I texted you, in the context of this season, it feels like scoring for no good reason. That's the way I described it, because
Mm-hmm.
in the nature of this team, when you're down 20, that's kind of what it feels like when you're watching it. But him doing that, was the only reason we had a shot in this game. And we actually really, even though, I mean, think about it. If Wemby makes both of those free throws, I mean, who knows if we get a stop, but then it's a tie ball game. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way that there's even a chance for that is because of what he did tonight. And that was super huge when you consider Devin Vassell shot 5 for 15 and 1 for 7 overall tonight.
For sure. And since you touched on it, I guess we should address it. Devin had a really rough game tonight.
Yeah.
I wish he would have been able to come along for this ride that Victor and Keldon kind of set up, because we've talked about it ad nauseum. When those three get 20
Yep.
plus, we really have a shot at winning this game. And it's only a bonus that Malachi had 19. So if Devin can actually hit more threes, he was 1 for 7 tonight. If he just hits 2 more,
Literally.
like it's wraps. It's San Antonio ball game.
Yep. And anyways, this is why we're paying Keldon Johnson $20 million. That's my point.
Yes, well said.
Third quarter. This was the quarter that I had the least written down. It is actually closer than it felt watching it. It was the same score as the second, 29-24. But for me watching it, Ethan, the two things I wrote down: typical third quarter halfway through. Just, we came out and got popped in the mouth a little bit. They went on a little bit of a run. I believe we kind of, the reason we made it a 5-point quarter was the second half of the quarter. But to be honest with you, I was kind of just so over the game at that point that I don't really have too much analysis for the third quarter. That's when we were down 20 and I was just very frustrated. Like, this is the same thing. They're about to just run away with this pretty easily. But the other thing that I did have written down was, once again, Keldon scoring for no good reason, kind of like Phoenix game 1, laughing emoji. That was exactly what I had written down. So
Yep.
Obviously already touched on that, but it even though it ended up being close from the eye test, it was a typical third quarter from this season where we have been consistently the worst team in the league in that quarter.
I think you summarized it perfectly, Jude. For me to add anything would just be a derivative of your so beautifully crafted words. However, I will say one last thing, that it could have been even worse had that 3 from Austin Reeves counted at the buzzer.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Which is crazy. From 3/4 of the court, he banked in a 3 and was 0.1 second away from it counting. That is insane.
I told Ethan if that went in, y'all might not hear from me like ever again. Y'all might be wondering, y'all might have been wondering if I was okay and where I was, because if Austin Reeves hit that, I would have walked out. I was like, bro, can we just not get one break? When they called that off, I was like, I didn't even think we were going to win at all at that point. But when they called it off, it was just like, I still needed it. I couldn't have took that. I couldn't have took that in this game.
Yeah, thank God it didn't fall. Thank God. It really would have been tough to pay attention in that fourth quarter had
It-
they hit that shot. It was
yeah.
already hard enough.
Right, right. And somehow miraculously, Ethan, we won the third quarter 45-30. Like, how did we almost score 50 points in a quarter? It's so random for this team. It doesn't even feel like it. Like, I know we had the outburst in the last 4 minutes, but it still doesn't feel like we scored that much.
Dude, Sean said it best, I think. He was like, suddenly the Spurs are playing with the energy they should have played for the first three quarters. And he couldn't even put a finger on it 'cause I don't know where it's come from. I don't know what it is. It probably, like you said, had a lot to do with the Lakers players more than the
Right.
Spurs players, but we still got to give our guys credit. They fought tooth and nail all the way to the end, and played great pressure defense and capitalized on their open shots finally.
Yeah, I really liked the ball pressure at the end of the game. Sean was emphasizing that, saying, "Hey, don't stop. We got a couple steals there." Malachi almost got one at the end of the game too.
Mhm.
I know that would have only made it a 1 point deficit, so we probably still wouldn't have won even if he did get that layup. But to see that defensive pressure and that ball pressure from the guys late in the game, it was good to see that, and hopefully we can implement that in future games.
Mhm.
The other things that I had written down, I didn't have too much written down for this one. I just had Keldon. That was it. Showed fight, which we did. Uh, the pass stolen by AD. Wemby
Oh,
responding to AD. And then Devin not getting free throws until 3 minutes. That was his first free throw of the game.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is frustrating when you really take a step back and actually look at the full thing. Like as great as much as we want to praise what we did in the fourth quarter, we need to do some of that in the first three quarters too.
Oh, absolutely.
We play
Not even
best.
a question.
We play best, Jude, when the guys are having fun and playing with high energy. So if I'm Pop, like look, I'm not a basketball guru expert, but I come out next game, I'm pressuring full court from tip,
Yeah.
and and we're just gonna try and play as freely as possible. We're throwing lobs, we're running hard, we're scrapping. I don't care if you foul out in the third quarter. Let's just try and knock the Lakers off of stride
We're
and
on an
find a
18 game
spark.
losing streak
Yeah,
anyway.
nothing could make this any worse. So might as well throw that out there and see what happens. That's just me.
No, for sure. I'm not opposed to that at all. I mean, obviously you don't see that as much in the NBA, but considering the makeup of this team too, with how young everybody is, you might as well just let them go out there and run. I mean, with
Yeah,
the defensive we already have problems with rotations anyway, excuse me. So we might as well just put the ball pressure on them there because if we're going to get beat on rotations in the half court, we might as well do it full court. You know what I mean?
1,000%. And then we take away some momentum from guys that are actually going into the paint. So if they're going up with less legs, that's just more blocks for Wemby.
And if we do get turnovers, then we're automatically in transition, which is better than our half court offense anyway. So I completely agree with that idea, Ethan.
Might as well, you know what? Let's make this even a bigger thing. Doug, it's been fun. We're playing Blake Wesley. We're going to let him pick up whoever's playing point guard full court and just let him go crab hands and swipe at the ball.
For sure. For sure. All right, Ethan. I think that wraps up about everything we can say about this game. Obviously, the Spurs are back on national TV this Friday when LeBron returns. So that'll
Yes.
be wonderful. Um, yeah, I don't think I wish I could say, Ethan, that I think that they're going to be able to build off of what we saw here in the last 4 minutes. But
Mm,
when you bring back arguably the greatest player of all time, um,
yeah.
it kind of takes away all the chances for that. If we were playing somebody different, maybe we'd be able to build up on it. But I just feel like with LeBron being back and
Mm,
also him witnessing how that game went, and it's his first game against Wemby, um,
yeah.
it's probably going to be a blowout. I don't have too much hope for that one, unfortunately.
Only silver lining I will give the Spurs one hope. The other back to back we had this year against the Phoenix Suns. The first game was very oddly similar to this one,
Hmm.
had the Spurs been able to pull it out at the end. Remember who was injured in that first game? Kevin Durant. Oh no. Excuse me.
Devin
Devin
Booker.
Booker. Devin Booker. Devin Booker.
That's
Devin
true.
Booker. Second game, D-Book's back. What did we both say? Oh, it's blowout. It's
Right.
wraps. Spurs about to get clapped. I know LeBron's a different player than Devin Booker, but I'm gonna give us that. I'm gonna give us that nugget because we dominate that second game. Like it wasn't even like a thought.
I don't think so.
That's so long ago.
I think it was down
That
to the
was so
wire.
far.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna pull it. Don't worry. I'm gonna go find it. Okay. Yeah, it was 132 to 121, but it was like
Okay.
Wemby pulled away in the
I
fourth
can't even.
quarter.
I can't even remember.
Okay,
Feels so long
well,
ago.
I've got the box score pulled up. So we won the first quarter by 20 points, and then
Mm,
it was on pace in the second, and then we lost the third and the fourth quarter, but we just kept pace with them enough because Wemby had 38. So,
that's right. I remember now. Let's hope for one of those games.
as J.R. Carr says, that feels like 5
It
years
does.
ago.
It
LOL.
does.
That
So,
is completely true. I just wanted to address this comment. I usually don't address negative stuff, and he hasn't really said anything else, but Howard Brown said, "You guys praising losing." And
actually, he
I
said loosing.
Yes, but, like, if you're gonna come in and do that, like, just go watch the rest of the show, 'cause I think we've said multiple times in this broadcast that this game was bad overall.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, we appreciate you guys for hanging out with us tonight. We're gonna still be around regardless of this losing streak that will probably extend to 19 games. We won't be doing this Friday's game, but we will be doing this Sunday, correct, Ethan?
Correct, Jude.
Yes, we will be back for that Pelicans post game, and that'll actually be a pretty fun one, especially if Zion plays, because that'll just kind of be
Mm,
a fun dichotomy, like Wemby versus Zion. They're like kind of the opposite, like enigmas of each other.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like Woody and Buzz.
There you go. There you go. I was kind of thinking, Zion's like a big dude and not that tall, and then I mean he's still very tall, but you know what I mean. And then Wemby's like giant Slenderman. It's like
Yeah.
Slenderman versus the Hulk.
Mm, I
No,
don't.
Mister
Potato Head.
no You're Mr. Potato. No, who's the Fantastic Four guy who's like Mr.
Oh, the
Elastic?
Thing versus Mr.
No,
Elastic.
Mr. Elastic. Yeah, that's what I
Or
was gonna say.
is it Mr. Fantastic?
I think it's Mr. Fantastic, but
Mr. Elastic.
he's elastic. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's kind of like that versus the Thing. There you go.
Heck yeah. We
There's my
got our.
superhero references for Wemby and Zion.
I like that. I like that. I'll have one on Sunday. I'll think of one.
Oh my gosh. We appreciate y'all. Don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter as well to stay updated with the show at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one. We'll see y'all later.